From 2 Grammy wins and starring in the biggest blockbusters on the planet,
You know what the difference is between you and me? I make this look good.
to a decade-long Oscar ban and to a sexual harassment lawsuit, this is how Will Smith went from Hollywood's most untouchable star to being blacklisted and where he is now. By the 2000s, Will Smith built one of the most durable entertainment careers Hollywood had ever seen, starting with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, picking up Grammy wins for Parents Just Don't Understand and Summertime with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and then doing the thing almost nobody pulls off cleanly, which is going from sitcom star to legitimate movie star without losing either audience in the process. But it was the 2000s, when the film career reached a level that's genuinely hard to overstate. The run had started in the mid-90s. Bad Boys in 1995, Independence Day in 1996, Men in Black in 1997, Enemy of the State in 1998. Each one performed, and each one added another brick to the argument that Will Smith was the safest bet in Hollywood. Wild Wild West in 1999 stumbled critically, but still crossed $200 million worldwide, which means audiences were showing up for his name alone, regardless of what critics thought. Denali came out in 2001, and it changed the conversation entirely. He trained for over a year, gained muscle, studied footage, and delivered a performance serious enough to earn him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. The box office run kept going through the decade. Bad Boys 2 in 2003, Hitch in 2005, which crossed $370 million worldwide. The Pursuit of Happiness in 2006, which cost $55 million to make and grossed over $300 million globally, and earned him his second Oscar nomination for Best Actor. He was one of the only actors in the world at that point where studios weren't asking whether a project would perform. They were asking how much. His name alone could greenlight a film, and that kind of leverage doesn't come around often. Through it all, there was never a scandal to speak of, and the devoted husband and loving father image he had built never once cracked. The Fresh Prince charm had scaled up with him, and it worked the same way on a global audience as it had on American television in the 90s. It's safe to say Will Smith was on top of the world, and it didn't seem like that would fall apart. However, what the 2010s had in store for him was a very different kind of story. The first real warning sign arrived in 2013, and it came from a project that Smith had designed himself. After Earth was a science fiction film directed by M. Night Shyamalan, and starring both Will and his son Jaden Smith. The concept had come from Will Smith himself. The production was built around the idea that Jaden would carry the film as the lead while Will played a supporting role. It was a bold swing, a blockbuster designed to launch his son's career while letting Will step back creatively, but it didn't work. After Earth landed at 12% on Rotten Tomatoes and grossed around $243 million worldwide against a reported budget of $130 million, which sounds acceptable until you factor in marketing costs, at which point the film was almost certainly a financial disappointment for Sony. Critics called it one of the worst films of the year. Jaden was singled out for particular criticism, which made the whole project feel like a miscalculation, with some saying the following: "I saw Will Smith in another attempt to make his son a star despite a lack of talent. Jaden Smith annoys me and he always looks like he doesn't want to be in the film." Then came Concussion in 2015, a film where Smith played Dr. Ben Omalu, the pathologist who discovered CTE in NFL players. The performance was widely praised, and critics and awards watchers were treating it as a serious Best Actor contender heading into release. But the film cost $35 million to produce and earned only $48 million worldwide, which for a major Will Smith vehicle was a genuinely poor result. It was largely shut out of awards conversations too, and it had underperformed commercially. Right after that, Focus came out the same year, a stylish con thriller alongside Margot Robbie that performed modestly, grossing around $159 million globally. Not a disaster, but not the kind of number that meant anything for someone trying to hold on to A-list status. Suicide Squad arrived in 2016, and Smith played Deadshot, and the film opened massive, crossing $750 million globally, but the critical response was brutal, landing at 26% on Rotten Tomatoes, and everyone spent the next 2 weeks asking how a film with that cast and that budget could feel so empty. That same year, Collateral Beauty came out and posted one of the worst opening weekends of his entire career, grossing just $7 million domestically in its first weekend against a $36 million budget. Bright followed in 2017. It was a Netflix original, a fantasy crime thriller that received some of the worst reviews of his career, sitting at 26% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, and the discourse around it was less about whether it was good and more about noticing how Smith's movies come with a pattern, with some saying, "That's every goddamn Will Smith movie. I, Robot, I Am Legend, Hancock, every Will Smith action-y movie since the 2000s starts with an awesome premise and then falls apart in the third act. It makes like zero sense but keeps happening." Then came Gemini Man in 2019, an action film directed by Ang Lee where Smith played a hitman being hunted by a younger clone of himself. The technology behind the film was ambitious, using cutting-edge de-aging effects to render the younger version of Smith. The film lost around $75 million, becoming one of the biggest financial failures he had ever been attached to. The one genuine bright spot in this stretch was Aladdin, also in 2019, where Smith played the genie in Disney's live-action remake.
You like it? No? Okay, all right, I hear you loud and clear. All right, but this is what you need.
the governing laws of Agrabah by royal decree, okay? And here it is, must marry a prince.
It crossed $1 billion worldwide and reminded people what Will Smith looked like when a project actually worked. But the film's success was largely driven by Disney's IP and the nostalgia around the source material rather than Smith as a standalone draw. It paused the conversation about his decline without really resolving it, and around 2020 and into 2021, Will Smith started taking apart the version of himself the public had known for 30 years. He launched a YouTube channel and gave audiences access to a more unfiltered version of himself. He began discussing his childhood trauma openly, talking about watching his father abuse his mother when he was a child, and how that experience shaped him.
Each of my siblings remembers that night in the bedroom with me standing there in the doorway. I watched my father punch my mother so hard that she spit up blood. That moment, probably more than any other moment in my life, has defined who I am today.
For a while, it seemed like people appreciated the honesty, and it made him feel more real than he ever had during the blockbuster years. But all of a sudden, in July 2020, Jada went on her Facebook series, Red Table Talk, and publicly confirmed that she had been in a relationship with singer August Alsina during a period where she and Will were separated. She called it an entanglement. Will sat across from her during the conversation, and that clip went everywhere immediately.
You and I were going through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And we decided...
I was done with your ass.
Yeah, you kicked me to the curb.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, I think from there, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement with August.
Rather than damaging him, the openness seemed to work, at least for a while. Received strong, surprising reviews and sold well. King Richard, which came out the same month, showed him delivering the best performance of his career to that point, playing Richard Williams, the father who coached Venus and Serena Williams to greatness. At that point, it may have seemed that the Oscar campaign was building and the comeback narrative was fully in place, but inviting people in that deep means there's nothing standing between you and the fallout when something goes wrong. Something went very wrong on March 27, 2022. The 94th Academy Awards was supposed to be one of the best nights of Will Smith's career, and for most of the evening, it was. King Richard had been one of the most acclaimed films of the year, and Smith had spent months on the award circuit building toward this moment. He had 2 prior Oscar nominations, no wins, and the industry had rallied around him in a way that made the win feel inevitable. By the time the ceremony began, he was the heavy favorite to take home Best Actor, and everyone in that room knew it. And Chris Rock walked to the microphone to present an award and made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to the lead character in G.I. Jane.
You know who's got the hardest job tonight? Javier Bardem and his wife are both nominated. Now, if she loses, he can't win. He is praying that Will Smith wins. Like, please, Lord. Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right?
What Rock may have not known, or may have not accounted for, was that Jada had been living with alopecia areata since publicly disclosing her diagnosis in 2018. Alopecia areata is an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks hair follicles, causing hair loss that can range from patchy to complete and is largely unpredictable. By 2021, Jada had started shaving her head entirely, and she had spoken openly about how frightening the early stages were, especially watching handfuls of hair fall out in the shower. With no cure available and no way to predict how far it would progress, Rock's joke landed, and what happened next is something most people who watched it still haven't forgotten.
Oh, wow! Wow!
The room went quiet almost immediately, and Rock was visibly shaken.
Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Smith walked back to his seat and from the audience, clearly emotional, shouted at Rock twice to keep his wife's name out of his mouth.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
I'm going to, okay?
Rock kept going and the show moved on. And later that same night, when Smith's name was called for Best Actor, he walked back up to that same stage and gave a tearful speech about love and about being a vessel for protecting people, comparing himself to Richard Williams, the man he had spent the last year bringing to life on screen. The audience gave him a standing ovation. The immediate response from the industry was a kind of collective stunned silence, because nobody quite knew how to respond to what had just happened at the most watched event in Hollywood. Within days, it started to move. Smith resigned from the Academy voluntarily the following week. The Academy's Board of Governors voted to ban him from attending the Oscars or any Academy event for 10 years, though he was allowed to keep the award. Studios that had been actively in business with him went quiet almost overnight. Netflix, which had greenlit Fast and Loose for Smith just weeks before the ceremony, paused the project, and deals that had been close to closing stopped moving forward entirely. The thing that kept coming up in industry conversations wasn't just the slap itself, it was everything that came after it. The Academy later claimed Smith had been asked to leave the ceremony and refused. Those sources close to the situation told The Hollywood Reporter that Oscars producer Will Packer had actually encouraged Smith to stay, which made the whole back and forth messier than either side wanted to get into publicly. What wasn't disputed by anyone was that he accepted the award, gave the speech, and attended the Vanity Fair party afterward. An unnamed senior executive told Variety that Smith had made the situation significantly worse by staying, because staying said more than any statement could about whether he understood the gravity of what he had just done. Viewers watching at home were processing it in real time too. Smith should have been asked to leave, at least, after assaulting another guest. And Will Smith's PR team and Academy marketing are having an effing aneurysm right now after that happened. What happened in those 4 seconds, and what he chose to do in the hours after, ended up defining everything that followed for the rest of his career. The first real test of what his career looked like after the slap was Emancipation. The film had been shot before the slap, a brutal historical drama about a man who escaped slavery in Louisiana and walks hundreds of miles to freedom. People who saw it said it was some of the best work he had ever done, and Apple TV Plus had paid over $120 million to acquire it. And the plan before March 2022 had been to run a serious awards campaign around it. After the slap, that campaign became impossible to run without every conversation turning into a conversation about the slap. Apple released Emancipation in December 2022 with a limited theatrical run to qualify for awards consideration, but the film received 0 Oscar nominations and earned somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 per theater location in its opening weekend. For a film Apple had paid over $120 million for, those numbers were essentially nothing. Then in March 2023, Chris Rock broke his silence. His Netflix live special, Selective Outrage, streamed globally, and Rock used it to address the slap directly for the first time in public, targeting Will Smith.
Everybody knows. Everybody fucking knows. Yes, it happened. I got smacked like a year ago. Fucking last week, I got smacked in the fucking Oscars by this motherfucker. And people like, did it hurt? It still hurts. But I'm not a victim, baby. You will never see me on Oprah or Gayle crying. You will never see it. Never gonna happen. I couldn't believe it, and I love Men in Black. No. It's never gonna happen. No. Fuck that shit. I took that hit like Pacquiao, mother. Practices selective outrage. Because everybody knows what the fuck happened. Everybody that really knows I had nothing to do with that shit. I didn't have any entanglements. I did not have any entanglement. And for people that don't know, and everybody knows, his wife was fucking her son's friend, okay? Now, I normally would not talk about this shit. But for some reason, these niggas put that shit on the internet. I have no idea why 2 talented people would do something that fucking low down. What the fuck? We all been cheated on. Everybody in here have been cheated on. None of us have ever been interviewed by the person that cheated on us on television. None of us.
The special reignited the entire news cycle around the incident just as it had started to fade. People who had moved on found themselves pulled back into the conversation, and Smith's name was everywhere again, attached to the same story. Bad Boys: Ride or Die arrived in June 2024, and it was the one moment in this entire stretch where things went genuinely well for him. The 4th film in the franchise, made alongside Martin Lawrence, did well enough that the people who had written him off had to reconsider. It crossed $400 million worldwide and proved that audiences hadn't abandoned him entirely. But even that film couldn't fully escape the gravity of what had happened 2 years earlier. There was a scene in Ride or Die where Lawrence's character repeatedly slaps Will Smith's character, and it was widely read as a deliberate acknowledgement of the Oscars moment, a way of getting ahead of the joke before the audience made it themselves.
That's it right there. Bad boy, bad boy, bad boy.
The film worked, but it worked despite the story around it, not free of it. On the music side, Smith released a gospel-influenced rap single called You Can Make It in June 2024, recorded with a Sunday service choir, which was framed as a statement of resilience and faith. It generated some coverage as he performed it in BET Awards, but nobody was talking about it by the following week. His first studio album in 20 years. based on a true story, followed in March 2025. The rollout was serious and ambitious, but the reception was quiet. The people who knew about it noted that Smith is going to have a real hard time redeeming himself from all the damage, with some saying, "The slap definitely hammered a bunch of nails into his career's coffin. I personally waver between pity and contempt for him. I think he could still redeem himself, but it would be tough. He would have to leave his poison-souled wife to start. Then he would have to take some small, tough acting roles that didn't have any of his usual witty nice guy energy and really put work into them." The album didn't chart in any meaningful way, and the conversation around it moved on quickly. The comeback had one real success in 4 years, and even that came with an asterisk. In October 2023, Jada Pinkett Smith sat down with Hoda Kotb on the Today Show to promote her memoir, Worthy, and said something that changed how almost everything people thought they knew about the Smith family looked. She revealed that she and Will had been living separately since 2016, not divorced, not publicly estranged, just quietly not sharing a home for the better part of 7 years while maintaining every outward appearance of a marriage.
You and Will decided that you were going to live completely separate lives.
Yes.
It was not a divorce on paper,
Right.
but it was a divorce. So from the year 2016, which is 7 years ago now,
Yes.
y'all have been
They attended events together, did interviews together, sat across from each other on Red Table Talk while she discussed her entanglement with August Alsina, and through all of it, according to Jada's own account, the marriage had effectively been something else for years.
Why did the relationship fracture?
Oh, why it fractured, that's a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think by the time we got to 2016, we were just exhausted with trying. I think we were both kind of still stuck in our fantasy of what we thought the other person should.
That information changed how the slap looked, not in a way that was comfortable to think about. Will Smith had walked onto the stage at the Oscars and struck someone in defense of a woman who, by her own account, had not been his wife in any functional sense for 6 years. When asked about the slap in that same interview, Jada said it was so out of character that she was at a loss, that she didn't know what was happening, and that she was as confused as everybody else watching.
I'm really shocked because, mind you, I'm not there. We haven't called each other husband and wife in a long time. I'm like, what is going on right
keep
now?
my wife's
name out of your
Yes,
mouth,
yes,
right? And I'm
yes.
like, but now I'm really worried for Will because I don't know what's going on.
The Smith family brand has always been central to Will's public identity. Will's entire image was built around being the patriarch of a celebrity family, which meant the exposure landed harder for Smith than it would have for someone who had kept their private life private, because theirs hadn't been. They had invited the public in, repeatedly and deliberately, and the version of the family they had shown the world turned out to be something quite different from what was actually going on inside it. Things got more complicated when a lawsuit was filed against Jada by Bilal Salam, a man described as a longtime friend of the Smith family, who alleged she had physically threatened him and pressured him to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Salam was seeking $3 million in damages, and Jada called every allegation completely fabricated. The case only added to the sense that the Smith household, which had once been something people looked up to, had become something people mainly followed for the next piece of bad news. And by the end of 2023, the name Will Smith no longer brought up images of blockbusters and Grammy stages and Oscar nominations. It brought up the slap, the separation, the canceled projects, and the question of whether there was any path back at all. In December 2025, a lawsuit was filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court that introduced something nobody had been tracking. The plaintiff was Brian King Joseph, an electric violinist who had appeared as a finalist in America's Got Talent and built a career around sets that combined classical technique with high-energy contemporary performance. According to the lawsuit, Smith's team hired Joseph in November 2024 to perform at a show in San Diego, and from there brought him onto the tour for his 2025 album based on a true story, the same record we talked about earlier. During that period, the lawsuit alleges, Smith told Joseph directly, "You and I have such a special connection that I don't have with anyone else." In March 2025, during the Las Vegas stop of the tour, Joseph returned to his hotel room, a room that had been booked and accessed through Smith's management, to find that someone had been inside it. There were no signs of forced entry. Inside the room were items that did not belong to him: wipes, a beer bottle, a backpack, HIV medication with a stranger's name on the label, an earring, and a handwritten note that read, "Brian, I'll be back no later, 5:30, just us," followed by a drawn heart and the name Stone F. Joseph reported what he found to hotel security, to police, and to Smith's representatives. Within days, he was fired, with management telling him the tour is moving in a different direction. They replaced him with another violinist. The lawsuit accuses Smith and his company Trayball Studios management of wrongful termination, retaliation, sexual harassment. It describes a deliberate pattern of grooming behavior that the lawsuit alleges led up to the Las Vegas incident. Smith's attorney responded by calling the allegations false, baseless, and reckless. The case is ongoing and all allegations remain unproven in court. The timing of the lawsuit becoming public, landing in January 2026, could not have been worse for someone who had spent 4 years trying to recover what he had lost. Bad Boys Ride or Die had offered a version of a path forward, a proof of concept that audiences would still show up under the right conditions, but the Brian King Joseph lawsuit complicated that path considerably because it introduces a new category of allegation that had nothing to do with the slap, the separation, or the box office failures. It was its own story with its own set of claims, sitting on top of everything else that had already accumulated. And as of early 2026, Will Smith has several projects listed as being in various stages of development. I Am Legend 2, a sequel to his 2007 film, is in the works with Michael B. Jordan. A remake of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is being developed alongside Kevin Hart. A science fiction film called Brilliance is listed in pre-production. Fast and Loose, the Netflix project that was paused immediately after the slap in 2022, appears to still be somewhere in the pipeline. But having projects in development and having a functioning career are two different things. By early 2026, the gap between those two realities had become hard to ignore. Industry sources speaking to News Station in January 2026 said that his offers had slowed significantly, that people were actively passing on projects that involved him, and that the enthusiasm that had existed before 2022 had not returned. One source also said that before the slap, people in the industry always had some reservations about Smith, but that after it, the calculation had changed entirely, and that it was genuinely hard to see a path back to where he had been. He also described him as having a bit of an anger issue and being a control freak, descriptions that would have seemed absurd about someone who had spent 30 years as Hollywood's most universally liked star. The whole thing is hard to look away from. Will Smith spent 3 decades building something that almost nobody else in the entertainment has managed to construct, which is a career that worked simultaneously across television, music, and film, while maintaining an image so carefully managed that it had survived everything thrown at it. The Fresh Prince warmth scaled up to global blockbuster status without ever losing whatever it was about him that made people want him to succeed. And then, on the night he finally got the Oscar he had been chasing for 20 years, he walked onto that stage and hit someone. He stayed for the party, accepted the award, and gave the speech. Everything that came after, the ban, the failed comeback, the separation reveal, the quiet industry retreat, and the lawsuit, all of it connects back to those 4 seconds and what he chose to do in the hours that followed. The projects in pre-production might happen, some of them probably will, but the specific version of Will Smith that existed before March 27, 2022, the one that seemed permanent, that version doesn't exist anymore, and there is no indication that it's coming back.